Welcome to the Thresholds of Reality, the podcast where we explore unexplained and mysterious events, phenomena, and legends. Today, I am joined by UFO enthusiast and expert Katie Paige from the Colorado Mutual UFO Network. Strap in as we explore the edges of the unknown. Hi, Katie. Thank you so much for joining me today on the program. The thing about this program, Thresholds of Reality, is that we have spent a lot of time lately talking about UFOs because they've been in the news a lot.
Right.
We've recently had a lot of congressional hearings about the topic. 2020 saw the release of video footage from military branches where they're pursuing tic-tac shaped objects as they fly over the ocean or through the sky. But your interest in this subject predates anything that has happened in the last 4 years. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, like so many of us, thank you. First of all, thank you, Sam, for having me on your show. It's an honor to be here. But for me, like so many people, I mean, I can almost guarantee almost anybody listening to these types of podcasts or interested in these topics, whether it's paranormal, cryptids, UFOs, have had some sort of interest or encounter or experience with it. And for me and my sister and my family, that was certainly the case for me. And just like so many of us also, even though these things have kind of been with me throughout my life, and I'll get into that with the Colorado Ranch, which predates the Skinwalker Ranch. Have you heard of the Skinwalker Ranch out there in Utah?
Oh,
well,
yeah.
There's a ranch in Colorado. And when I was a young girl, we were threatened and warned never to talk about what happened out there. So I never knew it was investigated. I never knew anybody knew anything about it. I was just curious about what I was experiencing, and my sister and my mother and so many people were experiencing back in the day. And I kind of started in the paranormal world, because there was a lot of paranormal things that happened out at this ranch. Got really interested in, the infamous ghost hunters and all that good stuff. And the curiosity kind of started building, like what's with the cattle mutilations on this particular ranch of my childhood is where Linda Moulton Howe got her start out here. She was in Colorado as an investigative journalist. All this stuff I found out later. So I joined MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, in 2012. Just sort of for my own selfish reasons. I came right in as a field investigator, which means you join MUFON, you take their courses, you study their big, their instruction manuals like this thick, you take the test. And I came in, I'll never forget my first meeting. It was like their big Christmas party. I'm like, hi, I'm a newbie. I'm going to investigate UFOs, Anyway, a year later, I ran across this book right here. It's called Hunt for the Skinwalker. And at the time, the Skinwalker Ranch didn't really have a TV show. It really wasn't as well known. So I picked up the book thinking it may have some commonalities or similarities to what I had experienced when I was young. And there's a chapter in this book called Other Hotspots. And I started reading about a ranch in Colorado. And up until I kind of started opening my big mouth and telling where the location was never known. And that's where I found out it was investigated by APRO, which is another UFO investigative organization, just like MUFON. And the one of the founding fathers of the Mutual UFO Network is John Schuessler, who lives here in Colorado as well. And he was well aware of the Colorado Ranch investigation through APRO. And he bestowed upon me the briefing document, which all this for me was new information. Like I said, I never knew it was even known about or investigated. And it was in this book that I learned of 3 PhDs that were the original investigators. Dr. Leo Sprinkle, PhD out of Laramie, Wyoming, who for over 40 years was well known in the field for both past life regressions and hypnosis for possible abductees or contactees. So I quickly wrote Dr. Leo Sprinkle a letter, told him who I was and my connection to the ranch property, and validated, the actual people who live there. And he wrote me back saying, yes, that is the ranch. This is the right people. And from that point, I started traveling back and forth to the Heritage Center there in Laramie, where he has over 70 boxes of his 40 plus years of research housed in the Heritage Center there in by the University of Wyoming. And I just started digging through all the documents from the investigation on the ranch. And now it's been over a decade of me diving deep into what was occurring out there on that property.
Wow. Okay. So were there any other, all right. So did you have any personal experiences that kind of pushed you in this direction?
Oh yeah, many.
Sightings or
Yeah,
encounters of your own?
yeah. I first want to make it clear, and I always say this on any podcast or show I go on or any speaking, but I did not live on that ranch full time. I visited the ranch. So my mother worked for United Airlines as a computer operator there in the Denver Tech Center, and she started dating a gentleman that she worked with, and that gentleman owned the ranch property. He had 3 sons. His 2 youngest sons went to a large school district and lived with us during the week. So we would take the boys back and forth to the ranch property. When they purchased the ranch, the first thing that was reported out there were these strange, unusual hum sounds and like bangs from under the ground. And these hums sometimes would get so loud that you couldn't even hear yourself speak over it. So this was a large ranch. They had cattle out there. They had a couple mutilated cattle. And at the time, like I said, what I had discovered, and I have like papers, we have just tons and tons of newspaper articles. We had hundreds of mutilations of horse, cow, sheep, even dog. So mutilations were going on. My sister and I, something I personally experienced out on the ranch property. It was a spring day here in Colorado, and we get these wet, heavy snows, but the sun shines and it's nice. We were out there flipping the Frisbee out on the ranch property in front of the ranch house. We looked down and we noticed we're standing on dry dirt where nothing grew, but on the outside of this large circle was wet snow. And it was really strange. We're like, what the heck is this? Why is this large circle here and there's no snow and there's no shrubs or grass or weeds or whatever? And it was just a weird experience. And then when I get the briefing document in the reports from Dr. Leo Sprinkle, there were 2 of these snowless circles on the property. And it was really interesting to read about it. It was validating for me because they said there were drops of blood in the snow when the investigators were out there, and they were 75 feet in diameter. So those were documented. The scariest night on the ranch, it was the boys' mother's birthday. We were all out there celebrating the birthday. It was late at night. The adults were in the front living room, like playing board games or whatever it was they were doing. Me, my sister, and the 3 boys were hanging out in the boys' bedroom, right? That hum sound started up. And at that point, the power goes out in the house, and the brightest light I've ever seen, I describe it like brighter than the sun's out the window. We're all freaking out. It was at that time we had this weird, threatening, it was like a disembodied electrical voice is the best way to describe it. So that terrified me. And in this document, to my surprise, and again, another validation, was the exact words from that incident. And again, I'm like 9 years old, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. So I'm a little girl when all this is going on. And I have like vague memory of it. My sister is in her teen years. So she's like, 14, 15, 16. 17 years old in those years, because this happened for 3.5 years. So she has, some memories as well. But the words were basically, we have allowed you to remain. We have interfered with your lives very little. Please do not cause us to take action which you will regret. Your friends will be instructed to remain silent concerning us. And so that was terrifying. And what I found out through the documents and that I uncovered at Dr. Sprinkle's was there was a heavy military presence on the ranch property. NORAD was involved. The United States Air Force Academy was involved. We had soldiers from Camp Carson on the ranch. So part of my whole investigation, and still to this day, what I'm trying to understand is how much of this is military black access projects. Even the mutilations that were going on, are these covert black op projects, or how much of it is paranormal, unexplained, maybe extraterrestrial activity. And it's just been an overwhelming amount of information and conducting interviews. And I flew to Florida and did interviews with Under Sheriff Bill Waugh's widow and his son, and found out information and what they were being told. I mean, we have, Men in Black kind of things. But what I uncovered too was this ranch property, before my mom's boyfriend's family bought it, it sat vacant for over 10 years. So if the military wanted to gain access to this property, they could have purchased the property, and they didn't. So I'm kind of left where I'm standing today with everything I've uncovered, is that both things were going on. We had a military presence and an unexplained phenomena occurring. So then the question became, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Was the military causing the activity, or were they there investigating the known activity? You know what I'm saying? And from what I've uncovered and researched, it appears to me, based on some documents I found, the property was known and referred to in the APRA reports as the old Mulligan Ranch. So I started researching the Mulligans and the provenance of the ranch property itself. And there was a gentleman by the name of Dick Mulligan who was born and raised on this particular property. Later in life, he became the caretaker at Winter Park Ski Resort up here in the Rocky Mountains in Colorado. And there's a black ski run called Mulligan's Mile. It's still there to this day. And if you research Dick Mulligan, it says he had bold exaggeration and the gift of gab. So he was known for these big stories. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't think they were stories. I think he was trying to explain to people what he was experiencing on this ranch, decades ago. And the same with the neighbor lady I interviewed, who had seen balls of orange orbs and lights flying off this property for decades. Also, what I uncovered is not only did this occur on the ranch property, but I have an Excel spreadsheet now of over 200 names of people that had mutilated cattle or these blacked out unmarked helicopters that were menacing people. I even uncovered articles, mysterious blanket of metal found in fields, really unusual metamaterials out there. Just you name it, cryptids, and on and on and on and on. So this has been my passion now for over 10 years, just trying to get to the truth of what's going on. And I'm so grateful and thankful that this kind of predates a Skinwalker Ranch. And finally, with the series Beyond Skinwalker, which is now on History Channel, I was very honored to be a part of that. They did their third episode is on the Rocky Mountain Ranch, which is based on my experience as a child out there. And it's going to continue on now for another season. So I'm really anxious, and I'm really happy that it's finally kind of being looked at scientifically, because the History Channel is all about, shooting rockets and digging and trying to figure out what the heck's going on. So I'm really excited to be a part of that series as well.
Well, that's fantastic. I mean, the experience that you had as a child must have been harrowing. It's not very dissimilar from one of the guests we've had on our show who was part of the military, and we thought he was going to come on and talk about having sex with ghosts. And he led us down this path of military black ops and remote control soldiers and all this other kind of really advanced technology of human mind control.
That's something. Yeah.
And so for you to kind of make that connection between the UFOs and the military activity, and which came first, chicken or the egg type scenario, really kind of brings, makes the hair stand on my neck. We have had some folks talk to us about that.
Right. One of the documents that I uncovered at Dr. Sprinkles, it says Warren, and his last name was redacted out. So Warren Blank from Camp Carson, again, Colorado Springs is heavy United States Air Force, NORAD, Air Force Academy, Camp Carson, all this. So Warren Blank from Camp Carson visits the ranch. Question number one, why is he visiting the ranch, right? Why is he even there? And then it goes on to say he felt something take over his mind, made him walk towards the woods. So there was ponderosa pines, like this wooded forest behind the ranch house, would release him. He would run back to the ranch house, and this did this to him 5 times. So he was saying something of like mind control happening out there on that ranch property. I'm like, so many questions about that. So I do believe there were some heavy black ops secret programs going on out there. I mean, definitely covering up something. In fact, I was at a conference speaking in Laughlin, and Richard Doty happened to be there. And Richard Doty is he's a admitted disinformation officer. He was in that film Mirage Man. And I was really curious. I was really curious just to ask Richard if he was aware, number one, if he was aware of the ranch in Colorado. Like, I wanted to know if he knew about it, because that would tell me something, right? Like, why do they know about it? And so I kind of cornered him, like, hey, Richard, I had already presented. He goes, yeah, we were just talking about your presentation, and I don't know who we were or whatever. But I said, were you aware of the ranch? And he said, absolutely, we were. So I thought, why? But then I asked him, what's with all these black unmarked helicopters out there? What was that about? Because I uncovered newspaper articles about these helicopters chasing like young kids out in, like, these people are cattle ranchers and they have children, and these helicopters are menacing people. I mean, I have articles about it here. And he's like, oh, it was a diversion. So in other words, these helicopters are out there distracting people because they're carrying out whatever nefarious things they're doing. So, I've had interesting people approach me, from the Air Force and whatnot. So I know there's some cover up going on, but it doesn't stop me from I keep digging because I want to know, I want to know how much of it is paranormal and how much of it is us.
Yeah, Richard Doty is kind of a duplicitous figure, and the problem that he has now is that he spent so much time feeding misinformation to the UFO community.
Right.
And now he's like, well, not all of it was bad.
Right. I want to tell the truth now. This part was true and this part wasn't. And that's a big problem in the field. And, full disclosure here, I came in, in 2012, 2013, really as almost a skeptic in the belief of aliens and extraterrestrial life and abductions and all of that. And I still wane a little from time to time. Like, I'm really open to hearing everybody out, and I'm always trying to connect the dots and, what are some common threads that run through all this. But it's taken me a long time and a lot of, just seeing a lot of real credible UFO reports and cases come through that I'm like, no, just like with so many, there has to be some truth to these events, because there's just thousands of reports, thousands of big reports. But the stuff that's coming out lately with Congress and Lou Elizondo and all that, I'm a little jaded when it comes to all this. So I'm not one that's really quick to just jump on board and believe everything these people are saying, because at the end of the day, they are taking orders and they're connected to the military. So I'm always a little hesitant to just believe everything that's put out there.
Yeah. And one of our viewers, Mojo, is bringing up a case that came, a long time ago in the kind of that same vein. He says the guy that shot up the Aurora movie theater was a neuroscience major, and there's so much about that story that doesn't fit the narrative. He was supposed to be giving a presentation to the Department of Defense that weekend on something related to bypassing moral conditioning to get soldiers to follow bad orders. And he says, I firmly believe that what happened was him presenting his research, and that the person who was on trial was not him.
Oh, interesting.
Interesting.
Wow. I had friends of my kids. I have adult kids now, but they had friends in that theater when that shooting occurred. Very traumatic. Yeah, it was terrifying. So yeah, I didn't know that second part of that. It's really fascinating. I want to look more into that. I hadn't heard that before.
So now we're talking about the experience that you had as a child and how that's kind of guided you towards Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, and this ranch in Colorado. We had some guests on the other day, and they were at a ranch. I'm not sure it was in Colorado though, but Matt wants to know, is it the same ranch from UFO Cowboys? I don't know.
Think so. I don't think so.
At any rate, so what has your research led you to since then?
Well, one of the there's so many things to talk about. It goes down so many rabbit holes because we had even the Sasquatch out there and everything. But one thing I did do, In the briefing document, there was a report of 2 A-7D interceptors in pursuit of a UFO that crashed out there. So I sent a FOIA, another thing, Rich, he's like, you should send a FOIA into Kirkland Air Force Base, Mishaps Office, which I did. And I received this huge document back on the crash out there. Both pilots ejected, both pilots survived. But there's some really interesting things in here. That says to me that they were in pursuit of some unknown craft out there. What they claim is that it was a instructor and a student pilot scrambled out of Buckley Air Force Base, which is now Space Force, and they were on a training mission. But in this report, it says there was 218 live rounds of 20 millimeter, gun on the craft, on the jets, and that they misidentified another craft, which they never identified in this huge thing. And the instructor lost a lot of his instrumentation on the craft. So his instrumentation went down. He's using, I can't remember what they said, to illuminate the instrumentation. He gets confused by this other craft, which they never identify, hits the tail of the other craft. Both pilots ejected, both survived. But it's really interesting. And then I went to David Marler's, and so much of it is redacted out, that like the really juicy parts. It's like you have these big blacked out section. I'll show you an example. But what's really fascinating to me is that right the same year out of Canada, our NORAD station out of Canada, they admitted to, I mean, we have these big, redacted sections. Look at this one. This is the transcript between the towers when it's just getting really interesting and they're seeing this other craft. Anyway, but there's reports out of that NORAD station the same year where they admit to scrambling two interceptors in pursuit of a UFO or an unidentified craft on radar. So we know they were doing that back in the day. So that's just another piece of the puzzle. That there was I even uncovered through the sheriffs out there that for a while over the county, this happened in Elbert County, Colorado, by the way, they had a no-fly zone in place, because they were actively pursuing these people that are mutilating these animals. They were trying to figure out what these unidentified marked blacked out helicopters were. So they issued a no-fly zone for a while over the towns. That's how often these mutilations were occurring. They had the Colorado Bureau of Investigations involved. Many different police stations from all across the Midwest were in communications with each other, from Montana to Wyoming to Colorado to Texas to Oklahoma to Utah. I just think there was a couple in Arizona, not very many, but all these different police departments where they were getting really hit hard with these mutilations were in contact with each other. And then I find out too that the Cattlemen's Association issued a $10,000 reward. So this is something people don't think about, but you have farmers and ranchers losing thousands of dollars of money in their cattle. And so they have this big reward, and people had loaded guns by their door. I mean, they had watches out at night trying to catch whoever these perpetrators were, and nobody's ever been caught. At the time, they thought maybe they were like satanic cults and all that. I think we can rule that out. It's been fascinating to me to get the opportunity to have conversations with Linda Moulton Howe and Christopher O'Brien and Chuck Zukowski, which the three of them and others really did the legwork on these mutilations. And through the being able to go and do this production with Beyond Skinwalker now, it's opened the door for me to get to know some of these local people that still live there to this day and have generations that have lived out there in Elbert County. And, a couple of weeks ago, I did an interview, and then Friday, today's Wednesday, Friday, I'm going out to conduct a couple more interviews with people who have generations that have lived on this ranch. And to my surprise, and like, oh my gosh, a lot of this activity is still going on to this day. So I'm getting testimony from people who are going through it now. And that was an eye-opening revelation for me, because here I'm thinking, all this ended a long time ago, but it hasn't. It's still going on. So I'm just left with, I think both things were happening at the same time. It's just a matter of chicken or egg kind of thing. Who started what and why?
So as you've gone through kind of examining those things, and now with the kind of the current climate regarding UFOs, we have this dilemma amongst people who research UFOs and people who know the history of the U.S. government's involvement with UFOs is it's been dicey. It's been deceptive,
to say the least.
and one of the words or terms that gets thrown around a lot in UFO enthusiast circles is PSYOP, psychological operation.
Right.
Where do you place the testimony of someone like, is it Philip Grush, Mr. Grush, and his co-testifiers or co-witnesses coming forward and saying, yes, the U.S. has UFOs or UAPs, and yes, they have non-human biologics, whatever that's supposed to mean. They want us to believe that it's an alien entity, and that they have, non-terrestrial craft in their possession. How much faith do you place in their testimony? How much skepticism should we have? Where does this lay in the spectrum between total believability and totally discredited?
Right. I think it's important to use your own discernment, but I can say this. Other than the ranch, my other, we haven't finished with other things with the ranch, but another case that came across my table about a year before COVID hit. So it's been several years because I was really heavily involved in investigating this. So there was a Brigadier General Arthur Exxon. Okay. And he stated with the Roswell crash that one of the Roswell bodies ended up in a mortuary outfit in Denver. Okay. So I get a case that basically is a couple who lives in California who's best friends with a mortician that worked in a mortuary outfit in Denver. This body sat, or this, it wasn't even a body. He didn't think there was a body in it, but this vault sat in the basement of this mortuary, which turns out is a mortuary that is really close to Lowry and Fitzsimmons, okay? Military hospital and military base Lowry here in Denver. And what's interesting is this vault sat where they stored the chairs for, extra flow chairs for like funeral services in the basement. And he was always curious about like, why is this vault in this corner of this room? And it's been here for, over decades. Like, why is this still here? Well, he comes to find out that there was a federal judge who put a hold on that body. And this man that I drove out to Truth or Consequences, New Mexico, and interviewed a couple times before he passed away, this mortician, he called it his caper. And he was really curious about what was in the vault. Okay. So he pulls this caper and opens the vault one night. He wrote a little pamphlet about it. And he, to his shock, opens this thing up, and there was a child size coffin, and there was a child, and he was mortified. And the body was covered in 7 layers of formaldehyde cloth. All the visceral was removed. The genitals were cut out. He said it had orifices for ears, really heavy brow, a really leathery skin. And at the time, he didn't think anything of UFOs or aliens. So he didn't go, because my first question was, oh, if it's the Roswell body, why didn't you take pictures of it or whatever, right? But he wasn't thinking that. He was thinking severely hydrocephalic child. He was mortified. His eyes were running and the thing smelled really bad. He couldn't believe. He thought there wasn't even a body in there because it had sat there for so long. He thought, well, maybe there were documents. He didn't know what was in there, but he was mortified to see this child-sized body in there. So long story short, him and his wife were hang gliders, and they're in Roswell, New Mexico, hang gliding. They just happened to go into the Roswell Museum. They learn about the Brigadier General Arthur Exxon's rumor of one of the Roswell bodies ending up in a mortuary outfit in Denver. There's also a Mason connection to this, by the way. So the federal judge who was appointed by Nixon. Okay, so the federal judge has a hold on this body appointed by Nixon, goes over to Eisenhower. It's this whole long thing. So I've been going to the Eisenhower archives there in Kansas and getting documents and trying to piece together all these people in this puzzle. So when it comes to, do I believe that we have recovered craft and recovered bodies? Because of that research that I've done and what I've uncovered about, Nixon and Eisenhower and all these things, yes, I believe we do. I do believe we have recovered craft. I do believe we have metamaterials. I do believe there were bodies recovered. So I do believe all that. However, that being said, I think it's unfortunate that whistleblowers they pass this law that, oh, we're going to have immunity for whistleblowers. Yay, good step forward, right? We want immunity for our whistleblowers, for our men and women who want to come out and tell the truth about what they know. The problem with that now is, and what we're all seeing play out is, now that we've had a whistleblower come forward, what do they do to him? They try to discredit him, tear him down, pick apart his life, pick apart his mental capacities and everything else. And what is that going to do to other whistleblowers? They're not going to want to come forward. And I think that was done intentionally for that reason. So to me, it's like watching this chess game, and it's, I think some of it is good step forwards, but it seems like we take a good step forward and two back, one forward, two back. So to me, it's like a game. And then you hear, people in the community that are worried about, a false flag narrative or a false alien invasion. And part of the testimony, which I watched like 2 times over, I was like pausing my TV every few minutes and like taking screenshots of like names and stuff when they showed documents, because I'm trying to piece together puzzles. And they're talking about that these, they would have the military, the military would stage fake abductions and fake alien landings and fake this as like a psyops to see how, all that. And I have to wonder, like, was that going on in Elbert County back in the day? Was that all part of some black ops psyop false thing? And I wonder about that too. That being said, I've had some activity, both, and we can get into the hitchhiker effect, which I kind of kept a lot of these different phenomena in different boxes. Like, oh yeah, this paranormal stuff happened at my house, and I never connected it to the ranch. You know what I mean? Until
Right.
Skinwalkers at the Pentagon came out and talked about this hitchhiker phenomenon that so many people experience when they go to these high strangeness locations. Something seems to attach to you and follow you wherever you go. Doesn't matter where you move or where you live. If you're kind of connected to whatever phenomenon, I mean paranormal ghosts as well, it seems to kind of follow certain people around, right? I'm sure you've experienced that in the paranormal world. No matter where a family moves, it's like attached to the daughter or whoever. It's that same kind of phenomenon within the UFO community in these high strangeness locations. And I found myself in that position where I was having things happen at home, away from the ranch or wherever I went. I'm having things happen in this house too. So it's almost as if, when you start digging or you get involved in these topics, it seems to, I don't know if we can manifest the activity ourselves to occur or what's happening, but these things are continuing to this day. And so not everything can be explained away by like black ops or, military, whatever, because I mean, how do you explain pictures flying off the wall or marks on your body or scratches or these other things that so many of us experience that they cannot do? I mean, there's only so much that, black ops can make happen that, other things are unexplainable. So
That's a great point.
Mhm.
At the same time, I'm always struck by the one thing that this one consistent thread through all of the episodes, all the interviews that we've done is don't trust the government. It's like the one thing that I just
He
feel.
said it. No, he said it. I did it. But don't.
So that's the only thing is that when we have Congress sitting
Ugh.
down and talking to people and giving them legitimate platform to tell their stories, that for the first time I was like, okay, maybe we don't have aliens. Maybe we don't have this stuff. If they're letting this guy sit down and talk about it, maybe it's not real.
Right. You have to think about that. Like, why?
Yeah, it takes a lot of wrapping my head around it and trying to pick it apart, because there's a lot of motivations, a lot of agendas that are part of it.
That's right. And money, there's money involved. And that goes like just, talking with, other experts in the field, even on just the cattle stuff. There's things I never even thought about before. Like maybe, there's a lot of money in the beef industry and people are trying to acquire other people's land so they can have more cattle to raise. And so when you put the almighty dollar in there too, you're like, oh, wait a minute. Like there's things going on here that I've, you have to consider all aspects, and that's true. I thought about that very same thing. I think about that a lot lately. When when you're a military man or woman, you're in the military to follow orders, and so you have to at least question what their motivation is. Are they just following orders? For what purpose? And so, yeah, I would just, I listen to what's going on. Um, Part of me, I just believe what I know I have experienced myself, or documents I've uncovered. So, I'm like, okay, yeah, I believe, yes, we've had downcraft. Yes, we've recovered bodies, but why? I've always questioned, like, why are they coming out now? What's the agenda now? Because we just
Yeah.
went through the hells of COVID, right? For these years, what was the agenda there, and what's the agenda now? So I just I'm just kind of jaded and untrusting, and I hate to be that way, but you have to be in this world.
Before we go back to the ranch,
Mhm.
Ish asked, has she
Uh,
talked about the Mexican Senate aliens yet? And
I haven't talked
no,
about it
I haven't
yet.
talked about it. Do you have any thoughts on those?
Um, hmm. Well, I try to make it my policy, like Jaime Maussan and the body that was taken out. I don't like to talk about other people's work and research, because unless you're there and the provenance, and you can touch and feel and examine all the evidence, I don't want to make a judgment, because I haven't done any of those things. What I could say is I have met Jaime Maussan. I met him in Vernal, Utah. He was a very nice and polite gentleman, and I do respect the work that he does. I think he's a great collector of so many great encounters and footage, and he kind of throws it all out there for us to look at and discern for ourselves. Some of it's hoaxed, some of it might be real. It's sort of like this whole hodgepodge of stuff. So when it comes to the Mexican hearings, yay, I'm glad that other countries are talking about this topic and following suit to what we're doing here. It's great. And I also have to send a reminder out there, we've had hearings in the past. So it seems like it's a pattern of, we get this interest, like Project Blue Book and all that, and then it goes away, and it's like this kind of cycle. But so yay that they had this. I don't know what the whole dragging this whole body out there. I just think it did way more harm than it did good, because now it's like, oh, that's all BS. None of it's true. And it actually kind of backfired, didn't it? I think it backfired.
Well, it's really funny, kind of ironic, but I used to live in Mexico, and they have these things called the mummies of Guanajuato, which look very similar to the alien body that they brought out. It also had kind of the texture of paper mache, pinata material, right? So I don't know. I didn't get to see it.
Didn't they say that people were like trying to like take chicken bones and different parts of animals and create these fake aliens to profit out of? I mean, we live in a world where people want to profit, and everybody has these different motivations for doing these things, and I just want to just go, what are you doing? It just hurts the whole field. It really, really does. And maybe that's the point. Maybe that is the point. Maybe somebody's paying somebody under the table and like, hey, do this, so the whole thing's discredited. That could be happening too.
Well, that you mentioned Richard Doty. That was his whole career
Gives me a headache.
was to mix things up, feed bad information, and steer people in the wrong direction.
Right. And even people that I really respect and admire have fallen victim to this. The great Linda Moulton Howe, who, at Contact in the Desert, I finally got to meet her face to face and sit and converse with her, which for me was full circle, because she started at, the ranch of my childhood. So we sort of started at the same time, same place. And to me, she has just, especially for females in the field, has just hung in there and just dug and dug and dug and dug and dug. And has she been led down some disinformational paths? And yes, she has. But to no fault of her own. I mean, she's getting so many people coming at her with so many different things. She doesn't have the time. And I know just from the research I've done, I don't have the time to follow every lead and investigate everything from the ground up. And I just respect the heck out of her. I really, really do. She's done incredible work through the decades, and she's still at it, and she's still going strong. And she doesn't let those incidents, those bumps in the road, keep her from really digging for the truth. At the end of the day, I feel like she is a woman that has been on this crusade, and it started at the ranch in Elbert County, where she's experienced all these high strangest things just like I did. And when you experience these things firsthand and you see it laying in front of you, and you can't take that out of somebody, you're going to want to know what's going on until the day you die. You know what I'm saying? Like when you're really experienced it and it affects you and your family and everybody, you will not stop until you get to the truth. And I feel that that's what Linda has done. And so it's unfortunate though that these disinformation people come in and taint that and try to discredit real good researchers like that and lead them down false paths. And I'm always afraid of that happening to me as well. So when people come at me, I'm like, who are you? What's your agenda? Who are you connected to? Why are you talking to me? Why are you telling me these things? And how do I verify what you're telling me? Yeah. I don't want to get caught up in that game either, but sometimes it's easy to do because you want to believe what people are telling you. You want to trust people.
Sure.
Yeah.
So back to the ranch. What kind of research is going on at the ranch right now?
Right. Well, fortunately for me, it's interesting. The ranch now, the property is gated off, and another family. And what's cool was the family that purchased the ranch purchased it right from, my mom's boyfriend's family. So it went from the experiences of us right to them. And so I left them a little note. It's gated off. I left them a little note in the box right before full-blown COVID hit and we were all in lockdown. Because in my mind, I didn't want to call up on my phone and tell them everything that had happened there. I don't know if they knew anything about the history of the property. And I didn't want to so I wanted to meet them like at a restaurant and talk to them face to face. Well, COVID came, kind of shut that down. And so when I was approached for History Channel, I'm like, look, here's the location. Here's the name of the people that own it. They got a hold of them. And lucky for me, we're open to learning about what had happened out there. So what was really legit and cool about the production of Beyond Skinwalker is I did not meet those people until cameras were rolling. I never even got to talk to them. So that was all very legitimate. And I can just remember going up to the ranch for the first time with cameras. So, we had David Carr and the cameras in my Jeep, and we're rolling up and it's dusk outside. And I wanted to know, because I hadn't been back since I was little, what I remembered, like the house and the barns and the silo and all that stuff. And it was getting dark. And I just didn't want to go up there when it was dark outside. So I was like in a hurry to get there, see what I can remember. And that was the first time I met the family that had worked there. And I came in with all my research, poop, and I plop it. We're in their garage. And I felt kind of uncomfortable because I'm sharing kind of scary things that went on there. And that was the first time that I had learned what, like Nicole growing up there, her whole life, she was born and raised on that ranch, what she had experienced as a child growing up, what they've witnessed, what they've seen, and all that. So it was a really cool experience for me to do that with Beyond Skinwalker. And how, people ask me sometimes like, well, did they feed you lines to say? Did they tell you, this or that? Zero of that. It's almost like, a reality TV show where you forget the cameras are there because they film for a full week for like 44 minutes of content, and you kind of just forget that they're doing that. So they're doing like rocket launches. The first 3 rocket launches were like kind of poking the bear, just trying to like, hey, we're here. We want to communicate with you. That fourth big, huge rocket launch they had all the scientific equipment in it to see if they can correlate it to what was going on at Skinwalker Ranch. And what's interesting about that is that particular rocket, it almost like it went up, it hit a wall, it went, came back and boom. And it landed really close to where that circle on the ground was. All the rest went miles away. This one went and then did this weird thing, like it hit something in the sky, came down. And all of the equipment, it recorded no launch at all. like, and
Strange.
even though they weren't able to get data, but that's the same thing that happened at Skinwalker. So that failure of the equipment was the same, which is also data. Do you know what I'm saying? So
Right.
that was really interesting. They did an experiment with a ham radio operator. They had in the original ranch house, they had equipment where they wanted to see if the frequencies in the house would respond to anybody, like trying to talk to something. And what didn't make the episode, which was really, really cool, in those transmissions, we were getting like reports from the Vietnam War from the early 70s. It was creepy. And we got a we're back and things like that. And they weren't getting any responses on any of the equipment until I talked into the radio and said, "Hey, remember me?" And all of a sudden the stuff was jumping. Another thing they don't show on the episode, I repeated that 3 times. And as everybody's scrambling around, calling people, you got to see what's happening, I started just talking to the house without the radio because I'm getting like mad. Like, who are you and what, I want to know who I'm communicating with, whether it's a ghost or, a bad entity or extraterrestrial. I don't know who I'm communicating with. And I'm yelling at the house. And as I'm yelling, even off of the radio, the equipment's jumping. So it felt like whatever was there was very intelligent. It was really, really, really creepy and strange.
That is wild.
It was wild. Yeah.
So your episode was
the third one, the Rocky Mountain
third
Ranch.
one, Rocky Mountain Ranch.
Yeah.
It aired in June. You can still see it on Hulu.
Can you?
Mojo is a fan of the series. He says, "Oh wow, I just realized what you're talking about. That was you on that episode of
Yeah,
the
me. Yeah. The coolest thing that didn't make the episode, and if and when, I hope that somehow they did send. There's a little clip of it on History Channel, and it's what I was so disappointed. But they did the biggest remote view in the history of the country at the ranch, with over 70 remote viewers from around the world. And there's a really good series, David Morehouse, they brought out to the ranch property. And so they had set up in that garage. His whole presentation was like 3 hours of what remote viewing is, the history of the remote viewers, how the whole process, what the remote viewers came up with. And literally my mind was exploding because they were coming. I mean, the remote viewers came up with these weird electric boxes. We haven't even gotten into the disappearing boxes out there yet that I witnessed in the daytime, but the boxes, the military presence, extraterrestrials, and I know we only have an hour and I wanted to get into that because that was one of the coolest things. But they hit on so many points, these remote viewers, and it was such an interesting part of the episode. And when the episode aired, I was like, oh my gosh, that didn't make, but it didn't make it because there's just so much that happened out there. I can't get it all in 44 minutes. So I hope that they expand on that and they use that footage because it was really interesting. But if you go to history.com, there is a little clip of David Morehouse and the remote view that was done out there. So yeah,
I'll check that out for sure.
Recommend, your viewers to go and watch that. It was really cool.
That is absolutely fascinating for sure. Was it scary to you at all? Were there any parts of it that shivers down your spine?
Yeah. The very first night out there, like I said, that first night of filming, it was dusk. So we're out there in the dark. A big snowstorm happened, right? We knew it was supposed to be cold and snowy, but it was like whiteout blizzard conditions. So here we are out there trucking around with our headlamps on and flashlights and, show us where you saw the box, Katie. And I mean, it's pushing like 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. I'm freezing cold. I wasn't prepared for the weather. I just had jeans on and I went over this barbed wire and fell for it. So my jeans are soaking wet, have all these layers of clothing on. And I'm walking the guys back to behind the ranch house where I saw this weird box when I was a kid. And as we're walking through the snow, and it's part of the episode, I noticed like there's no tracks. And then you see these bipedal, they're not deer, they're not elk, they're not rabbit, they're not dog. They're these footprints in the snow. And they're going, and the stride's pretty big. And then all of a sudden they disappear for like 12 feet where there's no more tracks. And then all of a sudden the tracks come again, and then they disappear into thin air. And I was so excited that they caught that on film because I'm like, what the heck? It was as if something came phased in, phased out. I don't know if it's portals. I don't know what it is, but it's like something came, walked, disappeared, came up, walked, and disappeared. And there were reports of these Sasquatch out there. This is from the original. They called them white fuzzies when I was out there because they had these gray hair. So these were reported as being out there. And then they had pictures of these extraterrestrials in the briefing document that were reported out there on the ranch. These strange, and I call them Tubi guys. I'd never seen anything like it before. I did not personally experience these guys out there on the ranch, but the adults, a lot of adults claim that there were two types of ETs out there on the property. These guys, these Tubi looking guys, and Nordics, these blonde, blue-eyed beings. And in the report, it said that these two types of beings were in conflict with one another. And one day I was at a grocery store. And I'm like, oh, perhaps these are like AI type of, robotic kind of guys. But the craziest thing that happened to me, it was like my third year in Colorado MUFON. And at that time I was as guest speaker coordinator. So I would, get in the guest speakers we had every month for Colorado MUFON. And I had invited a gentleman by the name of Sean Bartok that wrote a book called Flashbacks. And all I knew is he had a ranch in Colorado and he had experiences there and he wrote a book about it. So here I am in the third row watching his presentation. And I come to find out his ranch property and my ranch property, 14 miles apart. Okay. 14 miles. And up comes, this was the guy that he encountered. And this was the guy that the Elbert County Ranch encountered. He said these tubes right here came out like this. So this was his other drawing right here. These tubes came out right here. These tubes came out. So it kind of resembles this guy, right?
Yeah.
When the tubes are out. I don't know about you, but when I saw this, we didn't know each other. And the eyes are similar, the heavy brow, the wrinkles, the nose is kind of similar, the wrinkles around the face. I mean, that is, and we didn't know each other, and we are 14 miles apart. Same years. Isn't that shocking? It shocked me.
It is shocking. Wow. Remarkable.
So I was like, holy smokes. That and since then I've gotten to know Sean and his family, and we've had a couple lunches together and kind of compared notes. I mean, he had the strange circles on the ground, he had the strange noises, he had the mutilations, the paranormal stuff, the cryptids, all of it. So it's just so overwhelming. And then I looked at all these other high strangest locations like Skinwalker Ranch, Elbert County. There's Ohiopyle, Pennsylvania. There's the Marley Woods in Missouri. I do a podcast on Tuesday nights on KGRADB called MUFON What's Up. And just last night, we had Thomas Ferrario on, and he worked with Ted Phillips on Marley Woods. And I've never got to meet him until last night on the show, and to kind of compare what's happened at Marley Woods to what's happened in Elbert County. Also, we have, the Blind Frog Ranch in Utah, and we have Bradshaw Ranch in Sedona, Arizona. Mm-hmm. And to look at all these high strangeness locations in these particular areas, I'm like, what do they have in common? Why these areas, right? Something I looked at was a U.S. magnetic map. So all of these locations ping the charts. They're highly magnetic areas, just like with the paranormal. If you look at the Stanley Hotel, highly magnetic. You have limestone, you have granite, certain geological things. And then you look at the aquifers underneath, and most of these places like Marley Woods and Elbert County, they have rivers or streams or aquifers that run under the ground. So here in these locations, you have highly magnetized areas, certain geological elements, and you have aquifers and water. So I'm like, that's kind of compelling. I don't know if this allows us to interact with the phenomenon better, or if the phenomenon is attracted to these particular areas to open up doorways or portals or phasing in and phasing out. I don't know, but I think it's an important piece of the puzzle.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
a lot.
I wish we had another hour to go.
I know.
Unfortunately, we have come to just about the end. So I want to throw up this link, history.com/slow/beyond-skinwalker-ranch. That is where you can find full episodes and Katie's episode 3. Mm-hmm. Katie, where else can the audience find you?
You can find also, if you have Gaia TV, I did an episode with George Norrie on Beyond Belief. So if you want to learn out more about that, you can watch that on Gaia. You can also find me at my website, which is katiepaige.net. So if you have, I love hearing from people. So if you have questions or any experiences you want to share that kind of falls into this, I'm always looking for answers and commonalities. So I appreciate that. And again, it's my name, katiepaige.net. And you can contact me directly there. And you can also find my book there, Letters of Love and Light, which is not about the ranch. I'm writing the one about the ranch now. This is about Dr. Leo Sprinkle's work. I spent 3.5 years going back and forth to the archives, going through letters people wrote to him from around the world. I would take the photos home, read the letters, put them into chapters. So you have ET descriptions, craft descriptions. People talked a lot about, was this a dream or was this a memory? Implants, you name it, it's in this book. And it's really to honor Dr. Leo Sprinkle, PhD, and all the work he did in the field. So you could find the link for that there too. It's been a pleasure being on, and I'm just just looking for answers.
Well, hopefully we have you back to find some more answers and share them with everybody here. Thank you again for joining us. I know that time just slips by.
Right. Well, when we talk about these topics, we can talk about them for hours on end. So
that's true.
Yeah.
To everybody else, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, keep on exploring the edges of the unknown.